Thanks, Malcolm. Now, I am more than pretty sure that a majority of students have either seen or heard about the Meek Mill versus Drake conflict that occurred this past summer. But many of you may not have heard the recent comments from the former Alaska governor, Sarah Palin, that have raised a firestorm. In an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper on September 6 regarding immigration, Palin states, "If you want to be here, let's speak American." Now, linguistically speaking, Palin's quote has no substance because it is impossible to speak a nationality. Later on in the interview, Palin seems to correct herself by using the term English instead of American. But of course, this didn't stop the waves of criticism that were soon to follow in response to Palin's comments. Well-known conservative media personality Glenn Beck called Palin a clown and claimed he was embarrassed to have ever supported her. But this past weekend, when Beck himself faced criticism for his choice of words, he apologized, saying that he was unkind and inaccurate. Americans across the country seem to be indifferent about Sarah Palin and the various pieces of rhetoric from today's politicians and 2016 presidential candidates. So tonight, we are so privileged to have Jackson Crawford and Mario Rodriguez from SVN's The Gray Area to get their perspective on this subject. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
No problem, man.
Jackson, first for you, personally, what's your take on Sarah Palin's comment, "Speak American"?
Well, personally, I could care less, or I couldn't care less about the gaffe itself, because as you noted, she did correct herself right afterwards. What I find, what bothers me a lot more about what she said is the fact that we're having this conversation about, like, for example, whether English should be the national language, when instead we could be debating things that have a much bigger impact on immigration policy. We could be looking at the executive orders that Obama has pursued. We could be looking at, things like the DREAM Act. But instead we're talking about, what language we should be talking in.
Right. All right, Mario, do you think she continues to influence American politics today? And if so, how?
Not at all. I don't think she has any impact on American politics. To me, she's kind of like that uncle that lives way up north that just says stuff and you don't really listen to him anymore.
Right.
I mean, I feel like she hasn't been relevant in American politics since she ran as the vice president in the last election, or two elections ago.
Right.
So I don't really think she really has any sort of impact anymore outside of the social impact that she has when she says stuff like this. And it goes throughout the media. That's the only impact I think she has.
Okay, thank you. Jackson, why do you think politicians and presidential candidates are making more controversial statements than ever before?
I think it comes from a sort of desire for authenticity. You see that coming through in many ways, whether it's a surge of someone like Trump, who just says things that are downright politically incorrect, or someone like Bernie Sanders, who, while he's not necessarily being politically incorrect, he's saying things, however, that are consistent with the beliefs he's always had, and he seems like a real person. And when you have some politicians that are running that don't seem very genuine, it's understandable why people have that desire, even if the effects, like Trump, aren't always a good thing.
True. Mario, how do these statements affect the general public as a whole?
I mean, I really don't think they affect the opinion of the people. I think they reflect the opinion of the people because she's a representative. So someone had to elect her, and especially with the rhetoric going across the board with the Trump issues and all this stuff, I feel like she reflects a kind of xenophobic idea that America seems to hold in of itself. We seem to not like foreigners, especially nowadays with Palin coming out with his comments of we have to speak American. Like he said, I feel like the issue is we have to speak English, as if English is the only thing that identifies what an American is. So I feel like the big issue is that it reflects this xenophobic mindset that we as Americans have as a population. And that's really the problem, I feel like. That's a problem with what she said.
All right, thank you. And last question. Honestly, do you think Mrs. Sarah Palin will run for President of the United States in 2016?
I hope not.
She's not going to. I'll eat my shoe if she does.
Yeah, hope not.
You've heard it from the guys from the Gray Area. Well, thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate your rhetoric, and it's really been helpful. And I hope it's helpful for those here at the University of Houston. Well, before I toss it back to Malcolm, here's an update on the 2016 presidential campaign polls. For the Republican nomination, Donald Trump leads the pack with 33.7%, while Ben Carson trails behind with 17.8%, and Mr. Jeb Bush follows right after with 8.9% of voters. For the Democratic nomination, Hillary Clinton leads with 44% of the voters, while Mr. Bernie Sanders trails with 25%, but is slowly gaining support with the help of social media, which is very impressive. I'm Matthew Stell with @UH News. I'm so glad you could join me today. Back to you, Malcolm.